Welcome, and give me a sec to get squared away here. Okay, as I mentioned in Why Stuff Matters Part 1, you know about the waste management strategies of recycling and reusing, and to some extent you know about reducing. But our state and federal laws to date have focused largely on the recycling component of all of this. In this PowerPoint series, I'm going to tell you that there's a way cooler and way more insightful focus, and that is to look at the entire life cycle of our stuff. And here's what I talk about when I'm talking about entire life cycle. We're talking about materials extraction, which is this orange arrow. So for a cell phone, that might be extracting nickel and zinc from the earth. And then we're talking about manufacturing, transportation, use, and end of life of products. So that would be waste and disposal. For many years, we have sort of skipped over these four parts of the life cycle of stuff: extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and use. So let's take a closer look. If we focus on the life cycle of stuff, not just on disposal and recycling, we get a much better picture of what is happening. So here's the most complicated chart I'm going to show you today, and the focus for us is to look at this blue part. Stuff contributes 42% of America's greenhouse gas emissions, and that's when we include extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and waste in this. We're going to spend a little more time talking with this because this can be complex. Let's just quick look at the other components of this chart. So lighting, heating, and cooling of buildings contributes 25% of greenhouse gas emissions in America. So it's a good thing for us to make our homes more energy efficient. And something that I personally am trying to do in this arena is to move to a smaller house, as the size of our houses can be a significant factor in an environmental footprint. Passenger transport, that means planes, trains, and automobiles that we get transported in as human beings. So fuels for our travel are important to minimize as much as possible. Use of appliances and devices is 8% of our greenhouse gases. And so buying energy efficient appliances and conserving energy are two things we can all do to lessen our footprint. Lastly on this chart is infrastructure. And that is things like highways. And they account for about 1% of our greenhouse gas emissions. In summary, the making, moving, and disposing of our stuff contributes 42% of our nation's greenhouse gas emissions. It is likely that Americans contribute more to climate change as a result of purchasing our stuff than we do by driving our cars or heating or powering our homes. This is looking at that same information in bar graph form. So we're going to look more closely at stuff. And you can see that a whopping 32% of greenhouse gas emissions come from extraction and manufacturing. So that's the largest percentage by far. Transportation of our stuff is 7% of greenhouse gas emissions. And then, surprisingly, only 2% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from landfills and our waste. So before we go on, I just want to distinguish this transportation from this transportation. This is transporting humans. This is freight, barges, semis, rail cars that are transporting our stuff. So I really appreciate something that a colleague of mine, David Alloway, says about this component of the greenhouse gas emissions, which is such a small percentage of all of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted from our stuff. He says that because we have focused so much on our waste, it's been like the tail wagging the dog. So here, I'm going to flat out admit that it can be fun to have stuff. And I particularly like clothing that keeps me warm so I can be outdoors in Iowa in any wintry weather that Iowa brings. This is not my complete wardrobe of wool socks, but I am committed before I buy any new wool socks to darn some of these. So I like this chart because it rings so true to me. I first was introduced to this bell curve while reading Your Money or Your Life by Joe Dominguez and Vicki Robin. It shows the importance of having enough for survival and enough for comforts, and it shows us that we need a few luxuries too. But after that, look what happens. Our fulfillment level goes down. So I like the issues that we are discussing in this class because we can make headway on big environmental challenges and actually make our quality of life way better. Way better. So here's an example to which some of you might be able to relate. The other day, I went to the store because I wanted to buy some black tights. And I really didn't want to buy any used black tights. So I found 2 pair at 80% off. What a deal. After some thought, I decided to just buy one of those pairs because I wanted to keep my stuff to a minimum. I not only simplified my life and did one small action to protect the environment, I also saved money. As I look at this cycle, I think back to that bell curve. The most effective thing I can do to prevent the greenhouse gas emissions that come from all of my stuff is to think carefully before I buy so that I have enough, yet not too much. And I am still learning this and relearning it and relearning it. So as we come to the conclusion of our slideshow here, materials extraction, if we want to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that come from materials extraction, we can buy recycled or reused materials. If we want to reduce emissions that come from transportation, we can buy local. If we want to reduce emissions from our use phase of the life cycle, we can practice energy conservation. And on the disposal side, we can donate, recycle, or compost. And those are just a few of the things that we can all do. The big thing that I want to communicate here is that if we do this and as a result we buy less stuff by thinking carefully, and if we buy used and buy long-lasting stuff, we reduce greenhouse gas emissions in every single category, not just in one category. And a big shout out to the REAP Conservation Education Program, the Iowa Solid Waste Alternatives Program, EPSCoR, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and my friend and colleague David Alloway, and to the U.S. Department of Environmental Protection Agency. Thanks so much.